Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you with us for the webinar on how to survive the increasing demands for data for rankings and accreditation in collaboration with Academ and RimaOne. Last week at our webinars, which we resumed since spring and summer, we talked about the future of management education, discussing different trends, also the implication of COVID. Today, we will go more practical. We will talk more about how to handle accreditations and rankings and their demands for data management, how to organize these processes within the institutions. I'm glad to introduce our panelists. We have Axel Borschbach with us from RimaOne, who will run the webinar today. Axel, welcome. It's wonderful to work with Axel, and you might have met him a number of times at our annual conferences, where he would usually be there and share the latest developments in their work with the CEEMAN conference participants. We also have two representatives of CEEMAN member schools. One is Moscow School of Management SKOLKOVO, represented by Violetta Grigorieva. Welcome, Violetta.
Hello.
We have the privilege of working with SKOLKOVO since its establishment, with CEEMAN President Danica Purg, who has served also on the International Advisory Board, and it's always wonderful to work with this fantastic team who always have a lot of great innovations, great insights in the area, especially of executive education.
Yeah.
And the third participant is Marcin Matyja from Kozminski University. Marcin, welcome.
Hello.
And the story with Kozminski is also very special because Kozminski University was at the beginnings of CEEMAN. It was one of the founding partners of CEEMAN more than 25 years ago. And since then, we have been collaborating on a number of projects and initiatives. And Marcin is also himself an alumnus of our IMTA, International Management Teachers Academy. And I think Kozminski is taking the absolute lead in the number of participants at IMTA. But at Kozminski, Marcin, of course, besides teaching, is also taking care of accreditations and rankings. So just a couple of practical issues. The webinar will be running one way, so to say, so the participants will not be able to write in chat or to come in with cameras and microphones. So please post your questions or comments or insights and experience that you would like to share with the panelists in questions and answers, and Axel will then take care that they are addressed. But in case we will not be able to address all of the questions, I hope that the panel will be kind enough to provide their answers later on. We are also recording the webinar, and it will be available later on for all the webinar participants and also on CEEMAN website. So not taking any more time from you, Axel, Violetta, Marcin, the floor is yours. Enjoy. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Olga, and thank you everyone for participating in our webinar today. It's always a pleasure working together with CEEMAN, and thanks again also Violetta and Marcin for joining us today. As you know, I had the pleasure on being on both your campuses, and in this special year 2020, obviously that's something that we duly miss, being on campuses and on conferences, but at least we have situations like these where we can meet in a virtual environment and talk about this very timely topic of managing data for rankings and accreditations, which is something that all of us have to do. Some even may enjoy doing it. We're not going into detail on that too much, but really taking today to really learn from your experiences, from your best practices of how you do it at both SKOLKOVO and Kozminski. What we'll also do today is we're also curious to learn a bit about you, the participants in this webinar. So during this webinar, we have prepared two polls where we'd like your feedback on how you handle things. And while I'm going to pass the word now to our panelists, I'm going to launch the first poll where we would like to know from you, the participants, on what is your current situation, what is your journey. Are you already working on national, international accreditations, national, international rankings? Is it a multitude that you're working on? So please let us know in the poll that you should be seeing right now. And while you answer that, I would like to learn a bit more from you, Violetta, first, ladies first, of what is the situation for you at Skolkovo? Could you give us a quick overview of how you're doing in terms of rankings and accreditations at Skolkovo?
Thank you, Axel. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to see you guys, even though virtually, but yes, and CEEMAN is long-term partners, so delighted to participate. Well, for us at Skolkovo, we are a rather young school, so we started back in 2006, so we were only eligible to go for accreditation, and we have EQUIS 10 years after, yes, founding the school. So we had a very short time period and being encouraged by our founders to go and get accredited, which we did and got our first EQUIS accreditation last summer. This was an exciting journey, which was basically on the fast track because we were encouraged to do everything quickly, and there was great support from EQUIS office and from colleagues and peers in other universities that were helping us and guiding us on how to go through. So since we got accredited only last year, the first ranking that we participated, and like Olga mentioned, the school has been initially focused on executive education, and we are postgraduate, post-experience. So our first rankings that we decided to participate in, and also including the timeline, was the Financial Times Executive Education. So we got the results this May, and we think that for they said the newest, the highest new entrant, that's how the FT announced us in their cover, is that we got into top 50 of schools on cumulative ranking for both executive, customized and open enrollment rankings. So for the first timers, we are very happy with the results on that, but we haven't participated yet in any other rankings due to the time constraint. National licensing requirements and accreditations do exist in Russia as well, so we comply with those, but in line with the type of educational institution we are, since we are postgraduate and we don't have this higher education license. That's where we sit for now.
No. Thank you, Violetta. Well, I mean, it's impressive journey, also given that you're still a fairly young school. So it's great what you've been achieving in this time. Marcin, would you like to share with us the situation for you at Kozminski, and without, well, taking away too much already, your Triple Crown journey that you've been on?
Sure. Well, from the very beginning, when Kozminski University was founded, we believed very deeply that we have to be international, and to be international, we need to fight for the standard that would allow us to get international accreditations. And it all started with CEEMAN IQA, so the regional accreditation, and from that we were also going for the Triple Crown. So the Triple Crown at that time was what we wanted to achieve, but it started with EQUIS in, I believe, 1999. So relatively, we were a young school when we got the EQUIS accreditation, and then it followed with AMBA and with AACSB. So ultimately we got the Triple Crown and the regional accreditation, which is not to be skipped from that portfolio, because we believe that Triple Crown is one thing, but we also need to keep the deep roots in the CEEMAN community, and basically in the regional in the region. So that was the beginning, and we believed that accreditations were not the logos that we wanted to put on the Kozminski website or printed materials, but we believe that it can be the way to somehow keep the standards of the education and how the school is run. And then when it comes to rankings, of course, for us, there are two paths. So basically the international rankings, and obviously for business schools, the Financial Times rankings. So since we have, we run programs at the bachelor level and at the master level. So for us, the masters in management, masters in finance was the obvious direction to go with when it comes to the FT rankings and the executive MBAs. We don't run full-time MBAs at Kozminski. We run executive MBA. So that was also the way to go. And on top of that, we also go to the national rankings. I mean, you know, it's called Perspektywy, which is the biggest Polish ranking, and we have to be there because it's very important for the local community, local stakeholders. And on top of that, there are some rankings devoted to programs on law. And that is at the national level, which is also quite important for us. So when it comes to ranking, those were the natural paths for us to go. And last year, we also joined the positive impact rating. So this is the new initiative, which we believe is really important, since we also got the BZIS accreditation. So the accreditation from EFMD on impact, business school impact system. That field is also very important for us because we believe that it shows the new dimension in which business schools are also assessed and evaluated.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing that, the two of you. And I think what we see in the poll, and I'm going to share those results right now, is that we, I suppose, see similar situations with our participants. There are national requirements in every country of our member schools. There are potentially national rankings that play a key role for certain stakeholders. But then obviously the interest in international rankings, mainly the Financial Times for European schools, but then EQUIS and ACSB, but of course also IQA and others. Now, obviously, going for those accreditations and rankings, and you already said it, Marcin, obviously we don't just do it for putting just logos on our websites and our marketing materials. And I think if that was the only reason, I think that the amount of work that needs to be done to achieving those accreditations would also be a bit too high. And that brings us actually to the topic of how do you actually manage and collect data, and who's responsible for that? Like, is it a single person at your school? Is it a department? Is that responsibility shared? Enlighten us how you both do it at your schools.
Well, we have an accreditation office, an accreditation team, and it is responsible for collecting data, but I would also say, because it was a journey for us, okay? Of course, at the very beginning, it was collecting data for the accreditation, yeah, but we soon realized that it is a process, yeah, and it's not that you get the accreditation and then job done and you have 5 years to wait for another accreditation, but in fact it is about the way the school is managed and also the type of data that you need to collect on a regular basis. And then the next step of our let's say awareness how to organize it was to come up with a team which was responsible to constantly, you know, monitor the situation and take care for the data so that the data is available when it is needed, and that the correct type of data is being gathered throughout this process. So it was very important. So it became more a systematic approach rather than ad hoc initiative that, you know, there will be data needed in 1 year. Yes. So we wanted to get rid of that, that sort of thinking quite fast. And, you know, the newest initiative that we have right now at Kozminski is a team which is called a SARI team. So it stands for Strategy, Accreditations, Rankings, and Impact. And it's basically the accreditation team plus the rankings of the head of rankings and the impact manager, and that together creates a team which takes care of the data, but also on the initiatives taking place at the university, so that we are compliant with the standards and the expectations from the ranking agencies.
Mm-hmm. Violetta, anything?
Well, yes. Well, we are much more junior in the journey than Marcin's team. So it all started for us as a strategic project for the school. So basically, I was appointed an EQUIS project leader, and my team, who is in charge of the foreign affairs, was also partly working and doing the quality assurance work. So we had to pull together all the strings from different divisions of the schools while we were studying what's required for accreditation and what type of data and how. So obviously, once we collected everything, we were so happy with the results and the transparency and like the news that it actually all exists and the way it can be presented. So we actually kept managing it on a permanent basis. But yes, so my team is helping, but we also work closely with like the degree team. So we're working with faculty and the research statistics and everything that's necessary. But of course, there's always, when you're looking at the bigger teams that are managing the data with such like the impact data and rankings data, there's of course, room to grow, I would say. And me as a leader, I would like to have more resources, to be able to handle it better.
That actually brings us directly to our first question, the matter of resources. Now, obviously, there's different types of resources that we do need. Some may evolve around systems that we'll talk about in a minute. Others are human resources. And the question is, how many people do each of you have in their teams actually?
Well, for us, it's so as I said, the SARI team, the strategy, accreditations, rankings, and impact. We are 4. So there is a team of 4 people who are monitoring it on a regular basis. And then, of course, when it comes to the specific reaccreditation processes, then we have additional people who help us. At the time when the self-assessment reports are being prepared, when the visit, peer review team visit is being prepared. So there are more people involved, but there are 4 of us on a regular basis. Having that in mind, however, it's not that it's the only duty that those 4 people have. Yeah, so we are also involved in some other activities, but the SARI team consists of 4 people.
No, for us, my team is 5 people, but like in Marcin's case, they're not only responsible for the quality assurance, it's also a foreign office and the faculty office. So they do have other responsibilities. So we collaborate with other divisions of the school. Basically, as part of the project, we had representatives from each department of the school that were contributing their pieces of data, and they were writing SAR as well, right? So it was, and then we were pulling everything together and working as a project team collaboratively, I would say.
Mm-hmm. We got a second question, and it's one of the big questions that I really love to talk about. So thank you, Birute, for asking this. And the question is, if a school wants to start their international accreditation journey, which accreditation should they start with? Now, obviously, bearing in mind, both of you started with EQUIS. Is that something from your own experiences that you would recommend to other schools as well? Or what do you think are the decisive factors for a school starting the journey?
Well, again, each school is different, and it all depends on on the situation of a particular business school. So I would say free advice is worth what you pay for it. It shouldn't be taken for granted. Yet, I would say that there are 2 options. So one would be either to go with with a regional accreditation. So in our case, I would say CEEMAN and IQA could be a good starting point, because then it's typically, regional schools have similar factors influencing them, the institutions. So it could be one way of dealing with it. Alternatively, I would because we started with EQUIS when it comes to the three triple crown accreditations, but I think that as a nice choice for a school could be to go with EPAS for a specific program accreditation, which would be, I would say, a dry run for the EFMD process, and then from there it should be slightly easier to fight for to get the standards to the EQUIS. So I would consider regional accreditation and then EPAS rather than EQUIS straight away. But there might be some good reasons behind doing directly the other accreditations.
For us, since we were, aiming sort of high and had this long-term goal at going into FT rankings with executive education, so we couldn't go for the regional one because then you're not eligible to participate in FT, right? So, and also the same thing is with AMBA, because then exec doesn't count; it only counts for degree. That's why the choice was between ACSB and EQUIS. And when we started all the options, EQUIS looks more at the compliance with strategy of the school. So basically they are more open into different schools, not that conventional or standard schools, because we are not a part of the university. We are a standalone private school focused mostly on postgraduate education. So for us personally, it was the obvious choice due to the type of the school we are. So it was the entry point, and then the ultimate goal was to have a chance to participate with executive education in FT. So that was the reasoning. But other schools may be different, may have different situation and reasoning, and being part of universities as well may be much diverse portfolio of programs which would help them just do the EPAS and go with masters to the rankings.
Yeah, as I said, it all depends on why you want to get the accreditation. So for example, if the ultimate goal is to be eligible for the Financial Times rankings, then you as Violetta said, you can go EQUIS or EPA or ACSB because they only recognize those two. So it depends on really the situation at the school level.
Of course, the FT ranking is never the ultimate reason why you're going for accreditation, right?
No, but you're going with consistency. Quality assurance is great, but then you also want to aim further because your students are looking at that, your clients are looking at that. So of course. Something that you're killing two birds with one stone. So we were going step by step.
And at the end, and I know that from my own experience, from my prior life before I joined Academ, is that obviously FT ranking, and I'm sure both of you will agree, is a huge marketing driver for international student recruitment. I remember at our school that drove student applications by 100% actually. So that's a big driver. But to summarize what Violetta was asking, and as both of you rightfully said, I think it really depends on where the school is aiming at, what the strategy of the school is, but then also what you're eligible for, because some schools may be in a position that they're eligible for all the international accreditation, and then it's really a choice you have to make where to start, or to only focus on one or on multiple. But there may be accreditations from the various ones that were mentioned where simply school may, at least for the moment, not be eligible to join that accreditation process. So really try to do a review of those accreditations, their requirements, and see what works best for your own school. As I already teased a bit, obviously managing that data for the various accreditations, for rankings, required a systematic approach, as you already said, the two of you. So the question is, how do you store your data? I know from anecdotes from school that we speak with that the classic first way of managing data always seems to start with Excel spreadsheets, which has its rightful place to some extent. But I'm curious to hear, obviously, how the two of you are doing it, but also, and again, this is our second poll and the last one we're doing with our participants today, is we'd be curious to learn how all of you are managing your data. So let me launch our second poll, and I hope you'll share your insights of how you manage data. But let us hear from the two of you. How do you currently manage that?
Building on what you said, Axel, I would say, because I remember those times when we were running those Excel files, and to be honest, I mean, it gives you something. I mean, this is the starting point, but what I remember from that time is that you really learn the school. Yeah, and this is really something that, you know, if the data is gathered manually, you know, traveling from one department to the other, it really gives you a good understanding how the school functions. And of course, later on, when the system gets more automatic, and when there is much more intelligence in it, and expertise, it still helps to, you know, to remember that what was happening at the beginning. So I would say that this is also you know, if you are looking for a positive aspect of that, let's say, phase, it still can work. And then following on, well, answering your question, for us it's the Power BI. So we have developed a system on that platform, and we collect data through the dashboard on Power BI.
Well, for us, we also started with the Excel spreadsheets because we were just studying, okay, what's required. So you follow the templates that the FMD provides and just see what you have, what you don't have. But currently we do have the in-house platform, like the intranet, and the digital office is helping with developing different tools that how to collect data better, like the researchers is one thing, for the numbers and statistics, and for marketing purposes is the different one. And now with going more online, it's actually expanded, because the programs that are online now, we have the new EMS for collecting scores of participants and things like that. So that's expanding, and we're actually happy to see that. One of the positive results of the pandemic is that we became more digital as a school, and that's obviously a plus. Yeah, but it's an internal system for now. Yeah.
And I see, and I'm going to shut off the poll now and share the results that, as the two of you described, and I'm actually not surprised by the results, is that the results are actually very diverse. And obviously there's no one right answer, as with anything or most things in life. So it's great to see there's a lot of different options that are being used and in place, all with their designated advantages that they have. Now, moving a bit more in depth into what the topic of today. We've sort of, we've laid the groundwork now, but the question is obviously, and it was a bit of a dramatic question for the webinar, how to survive those increasing demands. Because as the two of you know, it's like once you start looking beyond just one ranking or beyond just one accreditation, there are variances in what is being asked in data. So what do you do to not drown in the requirements of collecting data, analyzing data, and how do you manage to collect data in a way that you can reuse data over and over for different purposes?
Well, for us, I would say that we don't gather data for accreditations or for rankings only. Yeah? So I think it is at some point when you have so many of them and you have them changing their requirements and their standards, you realize that if you try to build the data just to meet the requirements of a given accreditation or ranking, it is a never-ending story. Yeah? Because each accreditation has its own requirements, and then you do it once and then you cannot use it for another time. So we actually are gathering data, and it's also what the SARI team I mentioned is doing, that we gather data which is actually used by the leadership team for decision making. Yeah, and this is a data, and of course the secondary goal of that is that we have data that needs to be provided for accreditations and rankings, but it's data for running the school And on top of that, they can be redesigned to be presented to the external accreditation or ranking bodies. But what we try to do is to use the data, or to gather data in a way that we can tailor make them then to the specific spreadsheets and templates, but we don't gather the templates themselves. Yeah, so basically we gather data for decision making, for informed decision making for the leadership team, and of course if there is a new type of data being required by a given accreditation. I can give you an example for a recent development for us. We said, okay, we know we do a lot when it comes to our impact, but we didn't really have precise measurements how to measure our impact, yeah, on the system. So we decided to go for the BZIS, just to to make it part of the decision making, and so that we now have a better understanding of our impact that Kozminski University has. So and that data can then be used for another initiatives that are done. So I would say the takeaway from me going through the whole process would be, don't gather data just to fill in the spreadsheet and send it to EQUIS or whichever other accreditation, but gather the data that is useful to your school, and then you can shape, you can use it to meet the requirements of the given rankings or accreditation. So that would be my answer. I hope it answers your question, Axel.
Yeah, perfect. Anything to add, Violetta?
Well, I think it's I can only support Marcin in this, since it's really the data becomes very useful for different purposes, including benchmarking, or for example, you participate in unicorn surveys on how the schools are doing even now during the pandemic, or we are members of global networks like GNAM, and they also do the surveys and collect data and check how we're doing with faculty, how we're doing with students, how we're doing with research. So this is something that maybe the questions are shaped or formed differently, but the essence of the data that the industry collects and asks you, the questions that the industry asks you, are pretty much similar. So, and I think the same, I don't know how in Poland, but in Russia also you would look at the requirements of the state officials. More or less the the data across the system is very similar. It's probably like they would look at it from a different angle, but it becomes very, very useful. And we became more knowledgeable of ourselves and even of our marketing strategies or our long-term goals when presenting to the board once we got this data handy. So I think
building on what Violetta said, is that we have to keep in mind that typically it's not only the international accreditations and rankings that ask you for data, but you have also many reports to be submitted for national accreditation system or quality assurance systems or statistical offices, or data for your research grants or for your faculty publications. So there is a lot of data needed, which goes beyond just the Triple Crown, CEEMAN or FT rankings. Yeah, that's why it's useful to have a system where you gather the data anyway, and then whoever asks you for a given data, well, you may need to readjust the format, you may need to readjust the, let's say, academic year or the reporting year, yeah, because sometimes it's calendar, sometimes it's academic, but in a nutshell, you have the data, and then you just add whatever the given accreditation or institution asks you for.
What both of you touched upon, and this is for me, this was always where the fun happened, is when you, as the person in charge of the data, of the accreditation processes, etc. Obviously, you have a lot of insights into the school and what may be required for future processes. So, and as both of you said, it's like you are obviously also reporting to the boards. You're letting them know, you're letting them benefit from the data you have. Did you ever encounter situations where you would be in a board meeting and that they would be about to take a certain strategic initiative or decision, and you would actually have to step in and say, look, actually we cannot do this, because if we would take that decision, that would be against certain criteria of a specific accreditation that we're trying to achieve, or vice versa, suggest initiatives where you would say, okay, we really need to do this in order to be eligible.
Yeah, I would say definitely the other way around. I mean, because why not the first one? We came to the point at Kozminski that you know, the SARI team is always part of the leadership meeting, yeah, and basically there is this idea that, you know, decisions which might have an impact on our appearance in accreditations or rankings are always consulted, yeah. So also the leadership team has this natural need. So we got to the point where there is this natural need to double check whether the decisions are compliant with the rules and regulations. So that's why we typically don't have to stop anything from happening. But definitely, you know, the changes in the requirements or the focus on given aspects are sometimes influencing, for example, not necessarily if something needs to be done, but the time that simply things come up faster and happen faster, because there is this additional incentive that, okay, we get all the benefits of that, and on top of that, it's also useful for accreditation or something, yeah. So of course, again, it comes from this idea, and I really believe it can be done that way, that particularly accreditations are not the logos that you want to add, but they really are about the way the school is managed. And if there are some standards, and of course we are aware of different, you know, specifics of given regions or markets, etc., but there are some standards that they support, and which basically makes perfect sense also for the students, for the faculty, to keep them to be compliant simply, yeah. So we have this good understanding at our school that you know, they are also the I would say the agents of sort of trust and development of the school, yeah, in a way that you go in the direction business school community goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's really true, because as we mentioned, it's more of a quality improvement system, not just a quality assurance, yes, but quality improvement system for us. For example, those areas of improvement that the PRT team recommended, they immediately became part of you know, upcoming plans for the school. And for example, we had things in terms of ERS, and Axel visited campus, and he's seen that the campus is pretty in good shape. And if you look at the, you know, other standards and things that you might see in Russia, but when you're looking at the ERS requirements or impactful surveys, of course, there is no, there's always area for improvement, or of course area for investments. So for us to make a greener campus, you know, that was set as priorities, and we got investments and incentives into building a much greener campus. And already over the past year, we've done great changes with that. And this one is thanks to the improvement or recommendations that we were trying. Not like we were not complying, we were complying, but you want to become better, and you know where to move forward. And we were happy, like for example, the international paper, one of our board members, they saluted these changes and actually invested into making campus even greener. So this is something that I think helps developing the organization, and it incentivizes, obviously. Yeah.
I can indeed confirm from my personal peer review visit to SKOLKOVO that the campus is indeed in good shape. So now what I wanted to come back to, and again, I think this sort of goes nicely with actually the topic of today, is when we collect data, obviously not everything goes nice and easy, because there might be certain obstacles when we collect data. People may be reluctant to share data. Data may be difficult to get for different reasons. and there may also be biases when we collect data for people, you know, that are looking to share data not objectively, but with a certain angle. Are those things that you have been facing in collecting data, or any other issues that you have been facing in collecting data, and how do you deal with those kind of issues?
Well, I would say that we have gone through different stages, yeah, because at the beginning, when there was the accreditation team, but people didn't really understand what the accreditations are about, we were considered as auditing system, yeah. So we were coming and we were asking for data which typically they didn't have available, and departments didn't really like dealing with us, yeah. So they considered we are the threat for them. But we tried, I mean, that is, I think, the initial stage, which is quite often the beginning. But then what really matters is to show the stakeholders, internal stakeholders, that you are actually there to show how good the department is. Yeah. So then we managed to let them know that we are actually not auditing them, but we are trying to show their story. Yeah. We wanted to show what they do, because typically they did good job, but they didn't really have data to support it. So, at the beginning, when we asked them for what is happening at the school, they were giving us some information, but, there were not many numbers in those information. Yeah. And then slowly but surely, we got to the point where departments started. So, the international office, the marketing office, the alumni office, the careers office, the students office, they all started to realize that they actually, if they collect some data, and of course, some of them are compulsory for the accreditations and rankings, some of them are additional data that they can provide us, that with that, they can actually have some measurement of what they do. So on that, we were then able to go to the next stage, where actually stakeholders, so employees of the school, they understand that what they report, not necessarily to us, but also to the external systems. You have the statistical office and particularly to other systems, that it matters, because then there are accreditations that take advantage of that. They are rankings that take advantage of that. And it was actually quite visible this year when the national ranking I mentioned, Perspektywy, due to the fact that there was this, of course, COVID restriction coming from the fact that some schools were not able to deliver data in spring. They decided to cut the number of data gathered directly from the schools, and they were taking the data from external sources, mainly the statistics that schools need to report on a regular basis. Yeah, and suddenly people realized that the numbers they put somewhere at some point several months ago, they have an impact on the ranking. And that gave them a clear message that it's not some numbers in a random Excel that someone gets and no one takes care of it, but the data matters. So from our perspective, what was really nice to observe the change, yeah, from the shift from the old times when we were the bad guys asking for data they didn't have, then to the time when it was nice to have some data for those guys, but you don't know what they do with it. And then the ultimate stage where people understand that the data they provide this is meaningful. Yeah, this has an impact on where the school goes, what the ranking is, what the accreditation it gets. And suddenly, that was again with the BZIS accreditation quite visible, because very often the case is that you need to prove and you come up with your own measurements. And then the departments were helped us a lot to come up with numbers we wouldn't even think of collecting, but they already had it because they understood that, you know, measurement is important in terms of, you know, showing particularly such, you know, qualitative things like impact. Yeah, this is not really, and that's the challenge with impact. Yeah, that's why it's easier to measure, let's say, salary level than impact. But this is something which really is, from my perspective, from our perspective, when you look at the journey, really important to make people understand that the data they collect is really meaningful for the standings, international standings of the school.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add, Violetta?
Well, I can just add that it's a learning journey, because different, even when you're looking, for example, ACSB is collecting the data the certain way, and ECOS is collecting data the certain way, and there are different, you know, triggers and the methodology, and even, you know, the types when you're looking at who is counting who, and if you're looking at the co-faculty and who is accountable as a co-faculty and things like that, and you might have internally completely different system or the rules, so you may follow the legal requirements of your country. So that's something about the way of presenting the data. And here, from what I've seen, like in academia, what you guys are doing, helping to go through, especially if someone has not one but several accreditation to go, that's when you have a comprehensive system on managing data and actually helping converting those numbers that you have into the proper systematic and follow the requirements of those accrediting bodies or licensing bodies. So that's something that, because we may think that we have the same in our heads, the same types of data or the same approaches, but then there's some different column or like a different angle looking at the data, and then you're already kind of presenting it wrong, or maybe just misreading it. So that's something I would say is very helpful, and that's what we've learned. It's just you need to read very carefully all the manuals on what is meant by the type of data you are required to submit. So here, from what I've seen you guys are doing, is actually of great help.
Yeah, that's interesting what you're both saying, is that yeah, it takes a global view, like a lot of different aspects that you need to keep in mind. But also what I'm taking away from what both of you are saying is, obviously it's something that grows with time. I think it's too near impossible to just start from scratch by having absolutely everything on your radar and collecting everything right from the very beginning of a journey, because obviously, as we also discussed with different stakeholders, it takes time to convince people to see the added value, to see how what they are providing in terms of data benefits. And then something beautiful that I'm taking away is also that data that we do collect in the end obviously helps us tell a story. And depending on who is asking, that story may sound slightly different. And this again brings me back, and this is something that we've discussed during the CEEMAN annual conference, is how obviously looking at the same data from a different perspective, and that doing that, for instance, in the light of COVID-19 data, may give you very, very different story depending on the angle you're looking at it. But that also brings us actually to another question we have. And before I raise the question to you, I encourage everyone again who's listening, if you do have any questions on your mind, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. You can do so anonymously as well if you don't like sharing your name. I don't need to read your name. You don't need to share it. So we're happy to take any questions you have. But the question we just received actually nicely goes to what the two of you were just saying. And what's being asked is if you could give us an example of data that you collect that is actually not required in any of the rankings or accreditations that you currently do. So I'm going to say that you collect without any purpose or need, which obviously is not true, because we don't only collect data just for rankings and accreditations, but for other reasons. But do you have such an example from the top of your head where you're collecting data on a certain dimension that is not directly needed for any ranking or accreditation?
Well, with research data, for example, with us, because we do have the the research centers or centers of expertise, and for various grants, or for example, why bidding on for the state contracts, when you need to provide data, basically, okay, what type of faculty you have, what type of research you have, how impactful you are, and then you're working to actually get a good contract. And lots of data is required, and once you have it already on the shelf, it really helps. And you're bidding, and your bidding data is, you know, it's much easier to collect all those piles of papers for your clients and for the stakeholders.
Is there also any data, sorry, just a follow-up for Violetta, from the top of your, is there any data that you don't need for absolutely anything, that you're simply collecting because you may be curious about it?
Well, I think it's more about, there are certain surveys that we are doing while you're structuring your marketing campaigns or sales campaigns across Eurasia, for example, for the new products, for the new companies, or for the launch of a potential products, when you're just doing the surveys. So that's not for the rankings, but that's where basically you're studying the markets, you're studying the potential, you know, audience and potential students or clients, and also in terms of the content, basically what's in demand, what might sell, who might buy what, and why, and who with you would like to do it, to market it, because we are there at the open market, basically. So we have to compete for every bid, for each student, I would say.
Marcin?
Well, I have actually two examples quite from different fields. So the first one that we use for decision making, for example, and that is our internal need, is for example the student satisfaction on different aspects of the school. Yes, so you know, alumni office or careers office, what they would like to add, what they like, what they dislike. So those are things which we really use for decision making at the leadership level, but also at the department heads, and they rely on data. So there is a lot of well, I would say a little bit of consumer data. Yes, so so data collected from the industry, from outside, from the students about their plans, reasons for withdrawals, reasons for changing the program. So there are a lot of things on I would say daily operations on the one hand side. So that would be one example, which is basically the way data is collected at our school, not for the purpose of this accreditation, but for simply managing the school. Another example which ultimately led to an accreditation was, as I said, the impact. So it was already some time ago when we said, okay, what is, because we knew we do a lot for the city of Warsaw, we do a lot for the neighborhood, for the region basically, but we didn't really have ideas how to define the impact. Yes, so we started to collect different data, and this is also how different departments said, okay, this is the measurement we can use to see how impactful our, let's say, conferences, our workshops, our alumni meetings are. And suddenly there were already some ideas, and we said, okay, so maybe we would get a more systematic approach on that if we go for the BZIS, yeah, and BSIS. And that was not really what we wanted, and then how to collect data. It was really the other way around. So we said, okay, since we already have quite a good understanding, maybe we can have the BSIS evaluation, but it can reinforce the methodology, and it can help in making it more advanced. So that would be yeah, two examples that I could share.
Well, thank you both. Some very interesting insights. And as we're nearing the end of our webinar, I would like to come back to something that we have previously discussed when we were preparing for this webinar. And what I have a lot is that schools that we talk to, peers that I have in my network, I get asked quite often, Axel, I need somebody to manage international accreditations. Do you know somebody who's interested? So there's, and from that, what I see in the market is that there seems to be a way bigger demand for accreditation managers than there are people that may have that capacity or have some previous knowledge in doing so. And that brings us to what we previously discussed, skills needed. And obviously this webinar has been very focused on data, collecting data, managing data, analyzing data. So you might think what we need is a pure data analyst, but what I gather from our discussions is actually it takes a lot more than just a mere data analyst. So in your words, if you would have to write a job description for somebody on your team to help you work on the data part, on the accreditations ranking parts, what would you say? What are the key skills somebody needs to do a good job in that area?
Well, I would say there are two main aspects to consider here. Of course, one is the ability to crunch the numbers, and that's what you mentioned. At the end of the day, you play with numbers. You need to be able to present them, to interpret them. So that is for sure a must-have. But I would say there are two pillars here. Yeah, one is the numbers, but the other one would be more based on the soft skills, because you really don't get numbers from the heaven. You need to build the good connection with the stakeholders, particularly internal, but also external, or internal to become external, like alumni. But you need to make people understand that you will require some data, and that this measurement is needed and is required and is useful. So there is a lot of interactions, a lot of meetings, a lot of onboarding with new people, a lot of talks and discussions that, from my perspective, make your job later on easier, because you get better quality numbers that you can crunch. Yeah. So basically, to make the analytical part meaningful and useful, you need to take care first for the quality of the data. And to take care for the quality of the data and the data make them available, you really need this those interpersonal skills that you need to negotiate a little bit. Okay, negotiate the deadlines, negotiate the scope. There is a lot of interpersonal interaction that is needed until you end up with the nice spreadsheet or a report or any other series of numbers that you then can use in a meaningful way. So again, from my perspective, yes, numbers and analytical skills, but equally important would be this interpersonal communication, interpersonal skills that allows you to make people gather the data for you.
Well, it's just if I may add, in our case, it was actually about the whole team, the whole school, considering it a strategic project. So we were working as a team, and we felt that managing it as a project, basically following the basic PMI rules and having a project leader, and actually a leader that would be linking things together, but also that would have, I would say, the strength and the reputation, so that people would provide data, would not delay it. So you need to be persuasive, and you need, Marcin, you're right, to have good communication skills, but also it's a great teamwork. So it's about the organization in itself. If there are certain targets set and the team believes that it's the right thing to do, I think everything is possible. So it's more about interpersonal, yes, and proper skills for everyone.
I think that's a very nice wrap up of today's webinar. And we had one last question that's sort of been answered a bit by the two of you, and it was surrounding the importance of collecting alumni data. And as we know, yes, that is important. And what I gathered from what the two of you said today, but also what we previously discussed, obviously, before graduates leave the university, make them aware. It's like, here, we need to stay in touch. We need you in the future to collect data from you, from how you have evolved in your careers. So another important aspect to definitely keep in mind. And one best practice that maybe you allow me to share before we leave off, when it comes to deadlines, as we discussed, when you need data from people and you tell them deadlines, always give them a deadline that is a week or two prior to your own deadline that you need. Otherwise, you will be in trouble in the end.
That's
True.
So I see Olga's coming on as well, which means our time is up.
Right.
Thank you so much from my end, Violetta and Marcin. It's been very insightful, and I hope our participants took something away from the great insights that the two of you shared. And thanks a lot to CEEMAN for having us and doing this webinar together. Olga, any final words before we head off?
Yes, thank you so much for sharing your experience from different perspectives. I wanted to emphasize that, of course, data management is a hassle on one hand, but such a wonderful tool that can be applied in various aspects of quality improvement and institutional development that the schools should use more, and especially with more technologies available now. And also with the CEEMAN Equal Accreditation, what we look at the relevance as well as excellence of management development and of the work our schools do in particular context in which they operate. It's also very, very important. And what I liked most, I think, from this webinar today is indeed data helps us to tell a story, to highlight unique story of each of our institutions. And I think what we see a lot in CEEMAN is there are so many unique stories to share among our schools, given their backgrounds, given their cultural peculiarities, given their development path, given their different focus on types of education, on issues that they want to help develop, that it's really not, there is no one measure that can be applied to all. And this is what we really try to emphasize both in all CEEMAN activities and of course also in our accreditation and support services, is to stand side by side with our members and to help them have their stories heard and have their stories grow into successes and to new heights. Thank you so much, everyone. It's great to see you. It's great to have you with us. Have a wonderful day, and we stay in touch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.